Have you ever considered how close you might be to crossing the line between good and evil? Imagine yourself in a typical day, maybe at your desk, focused on daily tasks, when suddenly you're thrust into a situation that tests your core values. Would you stand firm, or might the pressure push you toward choices you'd never imagined? In the Lucifer Effect, psychologist Philip Zimbardo argues that the boundary between good and evil is more fragile than we think. Through real-world cases and psychological experiments, Zimbardo reveals how circumstances can transform ordinary people into individuals capable of harmful actions. This unsettling truth raises essential questions. Under intense conditions, would any of us be immune? Buddhist teachings echo this idea, emphasizing that our actions often shift based on inner poisons like desire, anger, and ignorance. Yet Buddhism also suggests that with awareness these forces can be managed. Acknowledging our potential for darkness is the first step to navigating this delicate line with purpose. In an unpredictable world, understanding this duality equips us to make conscious choices, resisting the forces that might otherwise lead us astray. Human nature, good or evil? Is human nature inherently good, or does evil lie dormant in everyone, waiting for the right conditions to surface? This question has captivated philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual thinkers for centuries. While society often labels people as good or bad, the truth is more complex. Psychological studies and religious philosophies suggest that human nature is shaped by an interplay of external factors and inner desires, capable of swaying individuals toward either kindness or cruelty, depending on the circumstances. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo's work explores this idea extensively. In his studies, he found that ordinary people who consider themselves kind and moral can commit shocking acts when placed in high-stress, high-pressure environments. For instance, in the Stanford prison experiment, Zimbardo assigned a group of college students to act as guards or prisoners in a simulated prison environment. Within days, many of the guards began to exhibit abusive behaviors, dehumanizing the prisoners despite knowing it was only a role play. This experiment revealed that individuals, under specific conditions, could lose their sense of empathy and moral judgment, illustrating that the line between good and evil may not be as fixed as we'd like to believe. Buddhism, a spiritual tradition that delves deeply into human psychology, also sheds light on this duality. According to Buddhist teachings, each person is born with a clear, pure mind, often referred to as the bright mind. This pure nature, however, is susceptible to corruption through the three poisons: desire, anger, and ignorance. These internal afflictions can cloud judgment, leading individuals to act in ways they might never have imagined. For example, desire can manifest as greed or envy, pushing people to make unethical choices for personal gain. Anger, when unchecked, can lead to cruelty and harm toward others. Ignorance, or a lack of awareness of one's own motivations and actions, often prevents people from seeing the consequences of their behaviors. But Buddhism also emphasizes that this dark potential doesn't define us. Unlike the rigid, good or evil labels that society often imposes, Buddhist teachings suggest that human nature is fluid. Through awareness, mindfulness, and self-discipline, individuals can transform these poisons, purifying their minds and redirecting their actions toward compassion and understanding. In this view, the path to goodness is a continuous journey of self-awareness and growth, rather than a fixed state. Zimbardo's findings and Buddhist philosophy converge on a key insight: Human nature is shaped by both internal and external forces. The potential for both good and evil exists within everyone, and the direction one takes is influenced by situational pressures and personal choices. By recognizing this, we gain a more compassionate and nuanced understanding of ourselves and others. Instead of rigidly labeling people as inherently good or evil, we can understand that behavior often reflects temporary conditions rather than intrinsic character. In a world filled with complex moral challenges, this understanding is essential. Recognizing the fluid nature of human behavior allows us to practice greater empathy and vigilance, both toward others and within ourselves. The line between good and evil may be fragile, but by staying mindful of our thoughts and actions, we can navigate this line more wisely and prevent ourselves from being swayed by forces that could lead us astray. What would you do if someone in authority asked you to harm another person? Would you refuse, or would you follow their orders, trusting that they know best? This question lies at the heart of one of psychology's most unsettling studies, the Milgram experiment. Conducted by psychologist Stanley Milgram in the 1960s, this experiment sought to understand the extent to which ordinary people would obey authority figures, even if it meant causing harm to another person. The results shocked the world and revealed disturbing truths about human behavior, showing just how easily authority can sway individuals to act against their moral beliefs. The Milgram experiment involved participants who were told they were part of a study on learning and memory. They were assigned the role of teacher and instructed to administer electric shocks to a learner each time the learner answered a question incorrectly. Unbeknownst to the participants, the learner was an actor who only pretended to feel pain, while the teacher believed the shocks were real. The shock levels increased with each wrong answer, eventually reaching a level labeled as dangerous. During the experiment, many participants showed signs of discomfort, hesitating, and expressing concern. Yet, when the authority figure, represented by a person in a lab coat, encouraged them to continue, a startling 65% of participants administered the highest shock level, despite believing they were causing intense suffering. This experiment highlights how powerful obedience to authority can be, especially when individuals feel that they're acting under someone else's command. Milgram's findings suggest that many people are willing to suspend their own moral judgments if someone they perceive as an authority figure assures them it's the right thing to do. This phenomenon doesn't necessarily reflect a lack of empathy. Instead, it reveals how authority can distort our sense of responsibility and make us defer our personal moral compass in favor of compliance. In Buddhism, obedience is often viewed through the lens of awareness and mindfulness. Rather than blindly following authority, Buddhism encourages individuals to practice discernment, critically examining their own intentions and the actions they are instructed to take. This approach contrasts sharply with the obedience seen in the Milgram experiment. By cultivating awareness, one can better recognize situations where authority might lead them away from compassion and ethical behavior. Buddhism emphasizes the importance of personal accountability, urging practitioners to take responsibility for their actions, regardless of who is instructing them. The implications of Milgram's work go beyond the laboratory, echoing through historical events where obedience to authority led to unspeakable atrocities. From the Holocaust to various acts of political violence, many tragedies have occurred because individuals deferred their personal judgment to powerful figures. Understanding this dynamic helps us see how important it is to question authority, especially in situations that feel morally ambiguous. When we trust authority figures without question, we risk surrendering our own moral agency, potentially allowing ourselves to participate in harmful actions we'd otherwise reject. In a world where authority often holds a powerful sway, the lesson from the Milgram experiment is crucial. Obedience is not inherently virtuous. True moral strength lies in the courage to question and, when necessary, refuse commands that conflict with our ethical principles. Recognizing the pull of authority can help us stay vigilant, resist undue influence, and make choices aligned with compassion and personal integrity, no matter the external pressure. By doing so, we can reclaim the responsibility for our actions and ensure that our obedience, when given, is grounded in mindful awareness rather than blind compliance. The loss of personal responsibility when the self dissolves in the crowd. Have you ever noticed how people behave differently in groups? When individuals are part of a crowd, they often lose their sense of personal responsibility and behave in ways they wouldn't if they were alone. This phenomenon, known as de-individuation, occurs when people feel anonymous or see themselves as part of a larger group rather than as individuals. When this happens, their sense of accountability fades, and they are more likely to engage in actions they might usually avoid. De-individuation helps explain why individuals in a mob might participate in violence, or why people online might say things under the veil of anonymity that they would never say in person. The Stanford prison experiment, conducted by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, offers a powerful example of this. In this study, college students were divided into guards and prisoners within a simulated prison environment. The guards, feeling empowered by their role and uniforms, quickly began to abuse their authority, degrading and humiliating the prisoners. The anonymity provided by their roles allowed these students to disassociate from their personal identities, causing their usual moral boundaries to erode. The guards weren't evil by nature, but the environment and group dynamics allowed them to act in ways they otherwise wouldn't. This loss of responsibility is a common feature in many troubling situations, from large-scale atrocities to everyday cyberbullying. When people feel anonymous or believe they're part of a collective, they often shift blame to the group, convincing themselves that they're just following along or not responsible for what happens. Online platforms, where users often hide behind pseudonyms, are prime examples. Safe behind the screen, individuals may engage in harassment, spread misinformation, or make hurtful comments they would never consider making face-to-face. The sense of anonymity dulls their empathy, and the distance from real-world consequences emboldens them. In Buddhism, this concept can be contrasted with the practice of mindfulness and self-awareness. Buddhism teaches that every action carries consequences, or karma, and that individuals are ultimately responsible for their actions, regardless of external influences. The emphasis on personal accountability in Buddhism serves as a reminder to stay vigilant, even when we're part of a larger group. Through mindfulness practices, individuals learn to observe their thoughts and actions, fostering a deeper connection to their moral center. Rather than losing oneself in the crowd, mindfulness encourages individuals to maintain their sense of responsibility, staying grounded in compassion and ethics. The dangers of de-individuation extend beyond psychology. History is full of examples where people acted destructively due to group mentality. During events like political protests, that escalate into riots or in wartime atrocities, individuals may engage in actions they'd never consider on their own. De-individuation can make it easier for people to commit harmful acts, as they lose their sense of individuality and perceive themselves merely as parts of a larger movement or cause. This loss of responsibility is not irreversible, however. By cultivating a strong sense of personal identity and moral responsibility, individuals can resist the pull of the crowd. Understanding that anonymity doesn't absolve us from the consequences of our actions is essential, whether online, in social settings, or even in emotionally charged situations. Remembering our own accountability can prevent us from being swept away by harmful group dynamics. Staying connected to our values allows us to act mindfully, ensuring that our actions align with our personal ethics, no matter the influence of the crowd. The concept of a no-self, or anatta in Buddhism, challenges our fundamental beliefs about personal identity and responsibility. According to Buddhist teachings, the self is not a fixed, independent entity, but rather a fluid collection of experiences, emotions, thoughts, and perceptions, all influenced by external and internal conditions. This idea invites us to question the traditional notion of a stable, unchanging self that exists independently of others and our environment. Rather than seeing ourselves as isolated beings, we begin to see that we are part of an interconnected web of experience, actions, and outcomes. Understanding the concept of no self does not mean giving up responsibility for our actions. On the contrary, it reinforces the importance of mindfulness and ethical behavior. When we realize that our actions do not occur in a vacuum, but impact both ourselves and others, we gain a stronger motivation to act with compassion and wisdom. This awareness of interconnectedness fosters a sense of responsibility, as we see that every thought, word, and deed contributes to a larger, shared reality. In this way, no self helps us rise above the ego-driven tendencies that often pull people toward harmful behaviors, resisting the temptation of evil through no self. One of the critical insights of no self is its ability to dismantle the ego, which is often the source of many destructive impulses. Ego creates a sense of separation and superiority, leading us to believe that our needs, opinions, or desires are more important than those of others. This perspective can open the door to harmful actions, as it fuels anger, greed, and ignorance, the three poisons in Buddhism that cloud our moral judgment. For example, greed may lead a person to exploit others for personal gain, while anger may drive someone to inflict harm out of resentment. By practicing no self, we start to see these ego-driven desires as temporary and unnecessary, helping us make more conscious and ethical choices. Buddhist teachings encourage individuals to observe their own minds, understanding that thoughts and emotions are fleeting and do not define who we are. When we approach our inner experiences with detachment, we can resist the pull of negative impulses more effectively. For instance, if we feel anger rising, instead of identifying with that anger and acting upon it, we observe it, recognize it as temporary, and choose a different response. In this way, the practice of no self empowers us to disengage from the automatic reactions that might otherwise lead us toward harmful behaviors. The role of mindfulness in resisting evil. Mindfulness, an essential practice in Buddhism, complements the concept of no self by helping us stay aware of our thoughts, emotions, and intentions in the present moment. With mindfulness, we become conscious observers of our minds, noticing the ego's subtle temptations and the factors that influence our actions. This awareness acts as a buffer, giving us the space to reflect before reacting. Instead of getting swept away by negative emotions or external pressures, mindfulness enables us to make choices aligned with our values and ethical beliefs. Through mindfulness and the understanding of no self, individuals are better equipped to resist harmful behaviors, even when faced with societal or peer pressures. When we understand that our actions are interconnected with the well-being of others, the temptation of evil becomes less appealing. We see that succumbing to ego-driven desires harms not only others but also ourselves, as we contribute to a cycle of suffering and negative consequences. In this way, the concept of no self is a powerful tool for cultivating ethical resilience. By letting go of attachment to the ego and embracing a view of interdependence, we can resist the forces of anger, greed, and ignorance. This perspective not only helps us avoid causing harm, but also empowers us to act compassionately and wisely, contributing to a more compassionate world for ourselves and others. The practice of no self doesn't mean losing our identity. It means refining our sense of self to align with a higher ethical awareness, making us better prepared to navigate life's challenges with integrity and compassion. Hero or villain, a daily choice. The choice between good and evil is rarely a single, defining moment. Instead, it is a series of small, often subtle decisions we make every day. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo and Buddhist philosophy both highlight the importance of awareness and conscious choice in this ongoing moral journey. They remind us that living mindfully, with our values firmly in view, allows us to navigate the complexities of life without losing sight of our ethical foundation. Each day, we are presented with opportunities to either reinforce our compassion and integrity, or to let our values slip in favor of convenience or self-interest. When we reflect on the cumulative nature of our choices, it becomes clear that heroism is often less about grand gestures and more about the daily commitment to act with kindness, integrity, and respect. Buddhism speaks to this with the concept of karma. Every action we take creates consequences, shaping not only our present, but also our future. By focusing on making mindful, ethical choices in each moment, we lay the groundwork for a virtuous, fulfilling life. Small choices, big impact. Imagine a person facing a moral dilemma in their job. Perhaps they are under pressure to meet ambitious targets, and taking a shortcut could help them succeed quickly, but would mean compromising their integrity. They might rationalize that a minor lapse won't matter much. However, each time they choose the easier path over the ethical one, it becomes easier to repeat. Over time, these small, seemingly inconsequential decisions can accumulate, leading them further away from their moral compass and potentially causing harm to themselves and others. Buddhist teachings emphasize that each action, no matter how small, contributes to the larger cycle of karma. By choosing actions rooted in kindness, honesty, and respect, we create a ripple effect of positive karma that benefits not only ourselves, but also those around us. Choosing the right path, even when it's challenging, aligns us with the principles of right action and right intention in Buddhism's Noble Eightfold Path, which guides practitioners in living ethically and mindfully. Zimbardo's research supports this, suggesting that individuals who remain vigilant about their choices are less likely to succumb to situational pressures that can lead to negative actions, staying awake to avoid slipping into darkness. In his work, Zimbardo discusses how easy it is for people to slip into harmful behaviors when they are not actively aware of their values. The line between good and evil is often a thin one, and without vigilance we can easily cross it without realizing. Mindfulness, a key practice in Buddhism, is invaluable here. By remaining aware of our thoughts, emotions, and intentions, we gain the clarity needed to recognize and resist negative impulses before they turn into harmful actions. Mindfulness helps us pause before reacting, giving us the space to assess whether a choice aligns with our values. When we notice a temptation to act out of anger, fear, or selfishness, mindfulness allows us to reflect and choose a different path. Over time, this practice strengthens our inner resilience, enabling us to respond to life's challenges with compassion and integrity, even when circumstances make it difficult. Choosing the noble path. Buddhist philosophy encourages us to choose the noble path, a path that respects others, nurtures compassion, and aligns with the principles of right livelihood and right speech. Choosing this path is not always easy. It may mean standing up for what is right, even when it's unpopular, or taking a harder route in work and relationships because it aligns with our values. In Buddhist terms, every decision that upholds ethical principles and respects the welfare of others creates good karma, contributing to a life of peace and fulfillment. The concept of self-discipline also plays a critical role in this journey. Self-discipline, as understood in Buddhism, is the ability to overcome impulses that lead to suffering. By cultivating self-discipline, we learn to prioritize long-term well-being over momentary satisfaction. For example, when faced with the temptation to lash out in anger or to exploit someone for personal gain, self-discipline helps us hold back, allowing us to act in ways that reflect our higher values. This discipline requires consistent practice and is strengthened each time we choose to act with integrity rather than impulse. Building a life of integrity, one choice at a time. At its core, the path to heroism, to becoming a person who acts courageously and compassionately in all circumstances, is a daily commitment. It's about choosing the light over the darkness, moment by moment. Each small decision to act kindly, to speak truthfully, to refrain from judgment, or to forgive others strengthens our character and prepares us for more significant challenges. We may not always succeed, but each attempt to act ethically brings us closer to living as our best selves. Zimbardo and Buddhism both suggest that we each have the potential for both heroism and harmfulness within us. The difference lies in our willingness to make conscious choices, to practice self-awareness, and to commit ourselves to principles that reflect our best intentions. Heroism doesn't require extraordinary strength or circumstances. It requires the humility to recognize our own vulnerabilities and the courage to rise above them each day. In a world full of moral complexities, understanding that the choice between good and evil is a series of small, daily decisions gives us a powerful tool. By approaching life with awareness and an openness to growth, we can navigate our challenges with grace and integrity. The path of heroism is not a singular decision, but a journey of countless mindful actions that, together, define who we are. In the end, we are the sum of our choices, and by choosing compassion, courage, and mindfulness, we choose to be the hero, not the villain, of our own story. Conclusion: embracing the light of goodness through awareness. In our journey through the choices between good and evil, one key realization emerges. True strength lies in the power of awareness. To live a life aligned with goodness, compassion, and integrity, we must cultivate a mindful approach to every thought, word, and action. Awareness allows us to see the subtle, often unnoticed choices we make each day, helping us steer away from impulses and behaviors that can lead to harm and embracing those that foster kindness and ethical growth. Living with awareness means recognizing the impact of every decision, no matter how small, on ourselves and those around us. When we are present and alert, we see beyond the immediate satisfaction of self-serving choices and consider the broader, long-term effects of our actions. Philip Zimbardo's research shows that under the influence of situational pressures, people can easily lose their moral bearings. By cultivating awareness, however, we become conscious of these influences, which enables us to resist temptations and stay true to our values, even in challenging circumstances. In Buddhism, this awareness is known as mindfulness, a practice that allows us to observe our thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. Through mindfulness, we become more attuned to the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance, which often lead us toward negative behaviors. When we observe these emotions arise, we have the choice to acknowledge them without acting upon them. In this way, mindfulness serves as a protective shield, helping us to avoid actions we may later regret and guiding us toward a path of empathy and wisdom. Awareness also reminds us of our interconnectedness with others. When we see ourselves as part of a larger community, we understand that every action contributes to a shared reality. This perspective encourages us to act in ways that benefit others, not just ourselves. By acknowledging our interconnectedness, we develop compassion, seeing that when we help others, we also nurture our own well-being. This shift in perspective allows us to respond to others with kindness and patience, fostering a more positive environment for everyone. The path to goodness is not about striving for perfection. It's about making small, mindful choices that reflect our highest intentions. There will be times when we fall short, acting out of frustration, fear, or selfishness. But each moment offers a new opportunity to realign with our values. When we recognize our mistakes, we can learn from them rather than letting them define us. This process of continuous self-reflection and improvement is the essence of embracing the light of goodness. In this journey, the practice of self-awareness becomes both a guide and an anchor. It allows us to observe our actions and intentions clearly, creating space to choose a response that aligns with our principles. By committing to a life of awareness, we make it harder to be swayed by external pressures or the fleeting desires that can lead us astray. Ultimately, the light of goodness shines within each of us. To access it, we must remain vigilant, staying mindful of our choices and intentional in our actions. This light is our true nature, one that reveals itself as we cultivate awareness and compassion in every aspect of our lives. Embracing this light requires humility, courage, and a daily commitment to mindful living, but it is through these small, consistent acts of awareness that we find peace, purpose, and a life of true fulfillment.